talk about. So there's a lot going on. We're really glad that you're here. So, hi to all of our Zoom people. If you can, I don't know where the camera. Oh, hi. Well, first of all, I'm Jason. I'm an agent with Florida Best Quote. I guess my title now is VP of Strategic Growth. So I come around and do a lot of these classes. I didn't come up with the title, but part of me, look, I just tell people I'm in the market. I'm over marketing. So my job is to, go around and try to, teach classes, educate, sponsor events and things like that, and support our agents that are in the offices. Because I was an agent in an office for about 10 years, 2 different companies. So I've actually been in the Keller Williams in Clearwater for the last 5 or 6 years, and have kind of stepped into this role now. And but Kim, this is Kim, and a lot of you've already met her. How long have you been an agent now?
10 years.
And I've been an agent for 10 years. So the good thing is, in this market nowadays, the 2 things that are really, really important is you need agents that know what they're talking about, that stay up with what's going on. And also you need a lot of options. And that's one of the things that us at Florida Best Quote, we feel like that we offer. We have more home insurance companies than 95% of all agencies in the state. We have 40-something companies for home insurance, around 20 for flood, 13 or 14 for auto. So we also do life, health. We have a couple of commercial agents in our office. So we can kind of be that one-stop shop for you. So Kim is here, and she's is a great partner for you to have. So if you have questions, I know her business card is in front of you right there. We also have a couple of things. If you want to, there's an app that Florida Best Quote has that you can actually download. And part of what that app has on it is a quote request form, right? And so let's say that you have a new listing, or you have a property that a buyer is looking at. And y'all know, like specifically, we were talking about flood insurance. Flood insurance is becoming one of these things that can be a deal killer, right? And so you need to know, or your client needs to know, hey, I need to know what the flood insurance is just to see if I want to make an offer on this home, that sort of thing. Or if you just have buyers you want to refer to us, you can it's a simple form that's on our website, and you do it through the app. You can see how short it is. There's not much to it. Contact information, name, address, how they're using it, and a couple of other pieces of information. If you can get it to us as quickly as possible, I know our goal, I know this is a tough goal for us to meet, but I know our agency owner is pushing us that if you can get them submitted by noon, our goal is to get them back to you same day, but 24 hours is the worst case scenario. So next day would be worst case. Anyway, but want to say anything about yourself?
My name's Kimberly. My little office is right there next to the bathrooms and the hallway. So next time you go potty, say hi. I'm here on Mondays and Wednesdays. So just walk over there and say hi to me. I've been doing insurance for about 10 years. I'm really bad at introducing myself, but yes, I've been doing insurance for 10 years. I have 2 children. I have an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. And that is why I'm here 2 days a week, because of my 2-year-old. She's stuck to mommy's hip. I worked from home for a while with COVID whenever I had her. So she's a mommy's girl now. But I'm always available. You can give me a call, shoot me a text, email. I do try to get quotes out the same day, like you said, if it's before noon. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. During the day, in the morning, I try to get all my quotes out, and then at the end of the day, anything that's left lingering, I try to get it out if it's a reasonable time. But I definitely do try to get that out as soon as possible.
Yep, that's our goal. And there's a couple of resources you have, not just like before we leave today. If you want to get a quick quote entered in, there's an option to do that. And I've got it set up where it would go straight to her. So as soon as you submit it, it goes to her and she can get on it. On the back, and we can actually pass these out later if we want to, but there's a little piece of paper. If there's an address you want us to take a look at real quick for a buyer, listing, whatever, it's like name, address, how they're using it. So that's the main thing there. All right, y'all ready to dig in?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you can.
So you said there's an app that we can download to request that
Florida
quote?
Best Quote. If you just
That's
type
the
in
name of it,
Best
Florida
Quote
Best Quote?
on the App Store or Google, Google store, whatever that is.
It didn't come up for us. We had to do it through your website.
Yeah, insurance
It's
agent.
actually insurance agent app.
Yes. Oh, but I thought if you go to Florida Best Quote, I thought it goes to that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the
If you
website,
go to
website,
if you go to
yes.
website.
Okay.
If you go on the Play Store, it's this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't do the Google thing, so I'm not sure.
Sorry.
Thank you for telling me that though. That way we know we're not. Yeah, and if you go to the app, just make sure that that you know, you should be able to go to her face, her picture, and there'll be request a quote from Kimberly. And then that way it'll go directly to her. If you don't, it's just gonna go to some generic person at our office. And you know, you want her working on it, so. All right,
He had a question.
yes.
And this is what you're gonna go through, what's involved with the quote, and what's taking a few hours to do the quote?
Well, we write with 40-something companies, and so there's a software system where we have VAs that we've hired that data entry all of everything that they can find out about the home, and you know, and a lot of that is information y'all have provided about the client and things like that. And then once all that's done, it's put into a quoting system, and that quoting system can take some time. It just depends because it's quoting all these different companies. And then once that happens, she would be notified, hey, we've got all the quotes set, and then she goes through the quotes to make sure, okay, what's the
That they're
best
correct.
option for the client?
Mhm.
So if we were writing with one company, it'd be no big deal. So I will say one thing, just be patient on higher value homes. If you've got a home that's valued at $1 million or more, a lot of those quotes have to be sent out to outside brokers. Because a lot of just the standard home insurance companies have limits on how much, you know, like if you've got a $1.5 million home, sometimes those can take a day or two. So, because we're waiting on other companies to quote back for us, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I call this insurance info to protect your clients. Main reason for that. Oh, you're not gonna stay up? That's
Oh,
okay.
I'm gonna sit right
Okay.
now with you, Jason. I'll
She's gonna chime in, so. So a lot of this information is stuff that your clients really need to know. And it's also things that they're gonna be asking you about. And so what we're trying to do is make sure you know everything that we feel like is urgent and stuff that just is relevant for right now. And so I think that's what makes this class really valuable. So again, if you have questions, just kind of stop us. So here's kind of where we're gonna go. We're gonna talk about the status of the home insurance market. What's going on? Why is it doing this? We won't spend a lot of time on that. There has been some legislation recently, 2 different sessions, actually 3 sessions, 2 last year, 1 early this year, that have made a difference, and we are gonna see some impact. The problem is it's just not gonna be immediate, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. What have the carriers done? You probably know a little bit about that. And then a big part of what we'll talk about too is because we've had to write so much with Citizens, and I can't speak for her, but I went years, 3 or 4 years. I never wrote a Citizens policy. Didn't have to, because there were so many other competitive options. Because Citizens, that's the state-run company. They're the company of last resort. They don't want the business. They're trying to push people to other companies, and they're doing that today. And so they've responded, and they're doing things related to roofs and flood requirements to get people to go to other companies. So that's part of what we'll talk about today, because I mean, you go from not writing anything with Citizens, and now you're writing
A
almost,
majority.
yeah, at least half. If you've got a home in the 70s or older, you're almost always going to be with Citizens. Otherwise, you're going to be, if the client doesn't want them, okay, get ready for a lot higher premium. And then kind of what your hold as far as how optimistic do we want to be for there to be change coming down the pipe? I think there is room for optimism. The issue is just how quickly, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. All right, so here's what's going on in the current market. If you want to know one of the main reasons that the insurance rates have gone up is the home insurance industry in Florida is bleeding money, right? I know the slide says 2021, $1 billion. The exact stats on that, I know back-to-back years, I think it was 20 and 21, it was $1.7 billion and $1.5 billion. That's how much the home insurance industry has lost in the state of Florida. So if you have a small business, if you're running a small business, think about yourself. And you're doing great everywhere else, but you've got this one state and it's just bleeding you dry. What are you going to do? And that's what we see today. You know, we got these 40-something companies. All of them have responded in some ways. They're either not writing in certain zip codes now. They're not writing in the state of Florida. They've gone insolvent, bankrupt. They're making their roof requirements or their age requirements so strict that they're just, we're not gonna write a home unless it's built in 2010 or newer. A lot of companies are doing that. We're not gonna write a roof unless it's 8 or 10 years or newer. A lot of companies are doing that because of the rise in fraud related to roofs. That's really been the big thing. I'll give you a couple quick examples. And there might be a place to talk about this later, but I'm gonna talk about it here. A lot of y'all probably are aware of that that's really the main cause. Yes, there's been some storms up near the Panhandle, of course, Fort Myers, but this was all going on before what happened in Fort Myers. So, the big thing is, it's all those knocks. Hey, I'm a roofer. I just was noticing, man, I've replaced all these roofs in the neighborhood and I just was driving by and it looks like you got some damage up there, can I take a look at it and get you a new roof? That's what's causing the home insurance industry to crumble in the state of Florida. Right now, I'll give you a stat, about 80% of all home insurance litigation in the country happens in the state of Florida, 80%. So that tells you a lot of what you need to know. There are lawyers throughout the state, especially in the Miami-Dade area. This is their whole business. They connect with roofers, fraudulent, dishonest roofers, and their whole goal is to try to get a roofer to convince you that you need, hey, I can get you a new roof. Understand insurance. That's not what insurance is for, right? Insurance is not for your roof is getting older. It's not for, you know what I'm saying? Insurance never works that way. Do they replace your car just because your car is getting older? No, if your car breaks down, you got to replace it, right? You got to fix it. So your roof gets older. So let me give you 2 quick examples that happened to me personally. And she's probably got some examples too. But in the last year, related to this, one of them is one of my closest friends, David. Him and his wife, Harriet, knock, roofer came to the door. Bottom line is they decided to sign over their rights to the claim, which is called an assignment of benefits, which basically hands your rights to your claim to your roofer, who then has this legal team behind him, and they're going after as much as they can get from the insurance company, right? So the insurance company calls my friend David and says, hey, we got a call. We record all of our conversations. I want you to listen to something, and can you tell us if this is your wife, Harriet? And David's like, okay. And they played the recording of a woman's voice talking about his claim, and it was not his wife, Harriet. So that is just my example, one of my examples. The other one was I had a client, and we talk to clients about this stuff all the time. We get clients calling us about their roofs. Hey, I'm getting ready to replace my roof, and they tell us how, and you're like, well, what should I say? They're getting taken advantage of. And so I had a client that I was explaining some of this to. She said, oh yeah, I had a roofer come by a couple of weeks ago, and I knew something was fishy because he told me. I was like, well, we haven't had a storm. And the guy's exact words, or the roofer's exact words were, well, we can Google a storm. In other words, what does that mean? We'll just put a storm. Hey, it happened for this storm, and now we're going to get it fixed. We'll get it replaced for you. That's fraud, right? And that's not what the home insurance companies were made to do. Another, of course, big part of this too is we've, especially I think nationwide, but really in Florida too, people have just been trained to call a lawyer first. It's always about, here, let me get my lawyer involved.
That's all you hear on TV.
Yeah. And so I remember a Morgan & Morgan commercial I saw one time where they literally quote said, don't trust your insurance company. Okay. Well, I mean, it's a mentality that has to be overcome, because now the results of all those things I just said, what's the result of that? We're living in the consequences of that. Some of your clients have a new roof, yay, but they just got non-renewed because they filed a fraudulent claim, or a claim where they didn't know it. They got a new roof out of it, but the home insurance company had to pay out $100,000. That happens all the time because $75,000 of that is going to the lawyer. That's what's been going on. Okay.
I want to chime in for a minute.
Yeah.
Last year, when Hurricane Ian hit, I worked about 80% of my business was down south. So even after the hurricane, I had no power. I was sitting outside watching my kids run around, play, cleaning up after the storm. And I had to walk to different areas of my yard to talk to people because people were calling me back to back to back to back. people would call me and tell me, hey, this guy just got here. Is it okay? He said he would, if I signed a paper, that he would do my roof for me tomorrow. It's much quicker than what the insurance companies are saying. And I'm like, no. No, you need to call the insurance company because sometimes they have assigned people that go out there and work on, they have assigned people that they want, that they trust to go and do that, assigned roofers. So it happens, especially when people are very vulnerable. I mean, people were sitting outside in their lawn chairs with tarps over their house, and just random people would walk up and say, hey, I can do that for you. I can do that for you. And then I tell them, if anybody does that, call me, and I'll call the insurance company and see if they're affiliated. And
Yeah.
about every single phone call that I made, the insurance company was like, no, 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 tell them no.
Yeah.
We'll call them, we'll tell them no. So it is a lot of fraud. Yes, I seen it firsthand whenever I was out there, working with the people with Hurricane Ian. It was awful.
Yeah, it's been really, really bad. So, but there is hope, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, where's my? Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about the legislation that's been going on. These are probably the three main things. This happened back, I think, in November was the special session that the governor called, and they actually did these three things, which are huge. Number one, the elimination of one-way attorney fees. So what I was told, and you might know different, I was told that there was the possibility some of that change was going to be challenged, right? Because this is all about, I mean, let's just be clear. This is all about de-incentivizing lawyers, right? You've got to take the incentive away for them to make millions and millions of dollars off of Florida homeowners. And part of that is getting rid of some of the fees that they're allowed to have. They have what's called multiplier fees, or they've had, where they can basically take their normal fees and multiply them by a certain factor, 3, 4, whatever, and charge that to the home insurance companies. So a lot of that has been eliminated. We'll see how that continues. Stricter deadlines on the claims process. I think I actually wrote a couple of those down. So basically, the amount of time an insured has to file a claim or reopen a claim has been moved from 2 years to 1 year, which I think that's positive. If you can't file a claim in 1 year, where's the claim coming from?
I agree.
So it reduces the amount of the time the insured has to file a supplemental claim from 3 years after the loss to 18 months after the loss. So I think those are good measures, right? And then the big one is this assignment of benefits. Remember I told you what my friend did? Hey, the roofer got his paper out. Hey, just sign this assignment of benefits form. And you're assigning your claim over to me. You'll never have to worry about the roof. You'll never have to worry about the insurance company. We're going to take care of everything, right? Just fill out this form. Well, it's good for the client in the way that I ain't got to worry about the roof, but they don't know what's happening behind the scenes. They know they got their $15,000 roof, but they didn't know that their home insurance company just got creamed for, $100,000 or whatever. So assignment of benefits as of January 1st, gone. No longer allowed in the state of Florida.
2023.
Yes, as of January 1st, 2023, assignment benefits are gone. They're not allowed in the state of Florida anymore. Thank the Lord, right? That's a big deal. So those are the three main things that came as part of that. There were some changes to citizens, which we'll get to this a little bit. Any questions about these three things? Okay. All right. Forgot this was at this point, so that's fine. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with citizens and their flood requirements. So as of April 1st, and have y'all heard some of the rumors out there that before long, every single Citizens client is going to have flood insurance?
Yep.
Okay,
No.
so those rumors are true as of right now. Now, again, Citizens is the state company. The state can make whatever changes they want. If they want to change the requirements, they'll change the requirements. So as of April the 1st, where we're living right now, if we write a new Citizens policy and a client is in a higher or moderate risk flood zone where they would normally be required to have flood insurance, right? Think with me here. When do they not have to have flood insurance? If they're on the beach right by the water, in a high-risk zone, when do they not have to have flood insurance?
They don't have a mortgage.
When they don't have a mortgage, right? That's who's being affected as of right now. It's the cash buyers that are in higher risk or moderate risk flood zones where if they had a loan, they'd have to have flood insurance. But they don't have a loan, so in the past, what? They don't have to get flood insurance. I'm just not gonna get it. I'll take the risk myself. Well, Citizens, as of April 1st, is not allowing that anymore. So if you are in a moderate to higher risk flood zone and a mortgage company, if you had one, they would make you get it. If we write a new Citizens policy, you have to have flood insurance in those situations. They're not gonna let that go. Now, some of this could have been the results of what happened in the Fort Myers area, because there was a lot of people in low risk flood zones that flooded out.
Yeah.
And so then you get into, well, is this flood insurance or is this home insurance? You know, and you get into some of those confusing things. And so Citizens is just making, I mean, again, I can't blame them in some ways. I don't like some of the things they're doing, but they have over 1 million policies now in the state of Florida. They're trying to get rid of people, right? And they have several ways that they do this. So this is one of their adjustments. So any new policy we write as of April 1st, they have to have flood insurance if they're in a moderate, which would be like A or AE zone, or if they're in a higher risk like V or VE, which means very expensive. So if you see V, VE, AE, a lender would require that if they have one. People that are cash buyers have to get it with Citizens. So what that means for us, here's what that means to your client. So if we write a new policy and that's the situation, what we have to do then is we are going to send your client, if Citizens is by far the best option from a price standpoint, we're going to send them a Citizens quote with a flood quote, and then we'll send them the next best home insurance quote without flood. And then the client has to just decide what they want to do. Make sense? All right. As of July, is it June 1st or July 1st? I don't think I wrote this part down, did I? July 1st, I did. So the April 1st thing that just started earlier this month, that's for new business. July 1st, that's when the renewals, those people in that situation whose policies with Citizens are renewing between July 1st of this year and July 1st of next year, all those people are going to have to get flood insurance. Okay, so this is a process with what they're doing. They're starting with the new business, then they're in as of July. So for the next year, from July to July, it's just the renewals of those cash buyers that needed flood insurance and didn't get it. So that's the next year. Okay, and then and I don't have the schedule with me. I don't think I put it on here. But after that, for the next 2024, 2025, 2026, that's when the X flood zones, the low risk flood zones, that's when they're going to have to start getting flood insurance. So but the way they're doing it, those 3 years, they're staggering it based on the coverage amount of the home, the building coverage. So, I mean, I'm throwing out, and maybe you know the exact numbers, but it's like, let's say that if the coverage is $750,000 or whatever, that's 2024, and then maybe 500,000.
Yeah.
That's 2025.
Yeah.
And
I
then-
think
2026 is everybody's gonna have to.
By 2026, that's the lower valued homes in X flood zones, right? Now, what we're hoping is going to happen is, and thank God they're doing it. They're not just doing it all at one time, right? They'd be blowing up the industry, right? If they did it all at one time. So they're staggering it, which is smart, and it's good for all of us and good for all of you. So what we are hoping is going to happen is some of that legislation we talked about as Citizens, and they're also going to be having rate increases over the next few years. So their rates are going to go up, and they're going to have those flood requirements. As they do that, what we're hoping is the market's going to stable, and all those companies that have gotten out of Florida or stopped writing in certain zip codes, or their rates have gotten really high, they're going to start doing this. And so hopefully in a couple of years, you'll see more like this. You know, Citizens is going to go up, their requirements. And hopefully some of the other companies are going to start coming back and actually writing reasonable, policies. Yes.
I have a question about the flood zones, because a lot of properties in Florida specifically, there's small ponds of water and lakes, and the whole structure of the house is in the X, but the very tail end that's touching the water is in an E or AE or something.
Right.
when you're figuring that out, is that person an axe or are they,
Good question. All right, so first of all, let me just say this. There's no such thing as no flood zone in Florida. Don't ever tell anybody they're not in a flood zone.
Florida is a flood zone?
Florida is a
Yeah,
flood zone.
that's what
X is a flood zone. It's just a low risk. It's a low enough risk where your mortgage company's not making you get it. But if you look at the stats and you look at the Fort Myers area, if you're in an X zone, a lot of them got flooded out, okay? So to her question, where it really comes down to on that, is there any part of the structure, anything attached to the structure that's in an AE flood zone? If the whole house is in an X, I've had this happen before. You'll have the house in an X, they'll have a pool cage and a corner of the pool cage is in AE. Technically, that's making the whole house in an AE. Now, we encourage all of our clients to get flood insurance, but homes like that, okay, you're in an X zone, but you're a foot away from an AE zone right in your backyard, you should consider flood insurance. Really strongly consider flood insurance. So it's all about the structure or whether the structure is attached. The whole land in the back could be in an AE flood zone. That's not going to make the insurance consider the house in an AE. Okay. And there's a whole nother class we could do about all the flood changes, flood rating 2.0 and all that kind of stuff. We don't have time to do all that today, but we can come back.
Just to further clarify though, if someone gets flood insurance and they're in the next zone, it's usually, I've heard that it's relatively inexpensive.
Well, the rates used to be set with an NFIP and with the private carriers. I mean, it was depending on how much coverage you had. I mean, they could be $300, $400, $500. We've seen that change. So, I mean, I had one 2 days ago that was $800 and something.
Yeah, I had one that was 1,000 the other day and
Yeah.
they were in an X zone.
Yeah, the NFIP, those quotes, they used to be, this is every year they would give us the zone, they give us the rates, and that's what they were no matter what for next zone. And I'll just touch on this briefly because this is part of that whole flood conversation. They changed the way they rate homes, which is smart. They're becoming more like the private flood market. They're you might be in an X zone, but if you have an A zone behind you, that house should be rated differently than you're in an X zone and you're 3 miles away from an AE flood zone. So they've changed the way that they look at that as well. They've changed how distance to coast is bigger. The closer you are to the coast, the higher your rate's going to be, which makes sense, but they've never done that. You could be in an A zone by the beach and an A zone in Spring Hill, and the rates are exactly the same. They don't do that anymore. So there's a less emphasis on the zone. They don't require elevation certificates anymore. It's all about two big factors. The value of the home impacts flood insurance now. Never used to do that. And then how close to the coast. Okay, so that was a sidebar for flood insurance. All right. Let me see, was there anything else about this? Make sure flood coverage is effective 30 days after it has to be within 30 days after the effective date. Otherwise, is it not gonna be an option? Like, I know it has to be within 30 days. I guess the main thing is with the flood insurance, if the client is being required to have it, there's a delay and there's a waiting period, 30 days for the NFIP. Some of the private companies can be 7 or 10 days, but it's a 30-day wait with the National Flood Insurance Program for flood insurance to start. So if you or your client has Citizens, and let's say your renewal is coming in September, then you need to have flood insurance in place 30 days before your renewal, right?
So a lot of people, when hurricanes are out there, they call me and they say, hey, I need insurance. And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
it's 30 days.
right.
So
I think next month we need to talk about prep for flood, for how we can partner together during hurricane season. That's coming up. We'll do that a lot in May. All right, the good news, there was a couple of updates that came out here recently. The good thing is Citizens is only going to require the maximum of $250,000 for the dwelling coverage on flood.
Yeah.
That used to be, if Citizens had 700,000 of dwelling coverage on the home, we were concerned they were going to require $700,000 of coverage for flood insurance. But they just recently, at this last legislation here in the last couple of weeks, they're only going to require the maximum of $250,000, whether it's an NFIP policy or a private flood policy. So that's great news. Okay. The one tricky thing is your contents coverage has to equal what your citizens coverage is
So if you have a flood policy right now and you're at 0,
for contents, yeah.
you have to add on $100,000 for content. You have to make it match. They have to be the exact same, which increases your flood policy.
Yeah.
And you're paying more money either way. So that's a big thing. I have a client who I'm rewriting and her policy was 1,300 with Tip Tap and Tip Tap's pulling out of the state. So I have to write her through NFIP. They came in the cheapest. $5,000 cheapest. So because she has a citizens policy, I had to raise her amount to 250. And because her dwelling coverage is 270 on citizen, so I had to do 250 for flood and add on 70,000 for contents on her flood, which she did not have on Tip Tap. So now she's going from 1,300 to 5,000.
Yeah.
So pray for me because I have to
Wow.
call her after this.
Wow.
Well,
But-
this is one of the situations where we might need to find a different, let's see if there's another home insurance company out there where you wouldn't have, if they're in the next, well, they're not in the next, so.
No, she's
So-
in flood zone.
Yeah, so she would have to have flood
Yeah.
insurance no matter what. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a real tough time right now because the thing we're hearing a lot about and our biggest concern is there's just a lot of people out there with mortgages that are on very fixed incomes. Seniors that are on very fixed incomes. And you've got the home insurance rates, everything's kind of, and now you're gonna make them get flood insurance. So there are a lot of concerns related to that. So I think the one benefit that we do have, and it doesn't mean there's other options, other better options, but having a lot of options at least raises their chances of us being able to find a different option for them. So,
When you're talking about the legislation that was passed and those three main items, and ultimately it's gonna be good for us, but it's gonna be good where we're gonna see the rates that have now spiked to 5,000 go back down to reasonable, 3,000, or have we lost that forever?
I would say that we're probably, it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
My opinion would be, I don't think we'll ever see some of the rates we saw before. Because a lot of those companies that have became insolvent, bankrupt and left the states, their rates were way too cheap. Like they were just, let me $700 for home insurance, on a 1980 home. Should have never been $700. And so the result of them not charging enough is, oh, sorry, we're leaving the state now. So I think it'll balance itself out. It depends on who you talk to. If you talk to the legislators, they'll say, oh yeah, in about a year, we'll see some differences. You talk to the home insurance companies, they're saying 2 or 3 years. So a lot of it just depends on who you're talking to.
All
right, I
right,
think that might be,
politicians tend to embellish things.
The one other thing is for condos, right? So condo insurance, most condo associations have flood policies. Those that do, there would still be a requirement now to have contents coverage coming down the pipe for some of those people. All right, same guidelines as the single family homes, but they would just need to get some contents coverage. So, and again, some of these things can change, right? All it takes is one more special session and they go, oh yeah, let's, unfortunately, a lot of times that's not how the government works. They don't use it. Once they've started something, it's really hard for them to ever go back on it, but we'll see. All right, and again, rate adjustments are gonna take time, but there will be more carriers that are gonna come back into the market. So that is going to happen at some point. And we've seen a little bit of that, but it's not been a huge change. All right, so as far as the carriers, how they've responded, and we talked a little bit about that, but I want to talk specifically about Citizens primarily because they're the ones that are impacting the most people. But like I said before, all the carriers are doing something, they're either gone or they just said, okay, these certain zip codes. Let me give you just 2 of the quick stats. 2 years ago, 2021, Progressive Insurance lost $250 million in the state of Florida, just Progressive. 2020 or 2019, I get my years mixed up. Universal, that was the company I was writing all the policies that I'm now writing with Citizens. Universal lost about $250 million in the state of Florida. So those are back-to-back years for those 2 companies. So that's why Universal now is not writing in nearly as many areas as they used to because they're bleeding money. So, all right. So what we've seen mainly, we've seen companies, of course, go into receivership, a lot of stricter roof guidelines. some of the companies, it's been laughable. They just come in and go, yeah, we're not gonna take any roofs older than 8 years old. Tile, metal, 8 years. That's basically them saying, we don't even want to touch that market at all. That's them doing that instead of getting out of Florida. Okay, so that's, some of that's understandable. Of course, higher premiums, not renewing policies in certain areas. You'll have a lot of clients, and some of you might have seen this. Your home insurance getting non-renewed for, what's the phrase they use? Do you remember? It's basically confusing, but all they're basically saying is we're managing how many policies we're gonna have in that zip code, and we have too many. So we need to eliminate a certain number of policies in a certain zip code. So we see a lot of that. And then, of course, Citizens becoming more prevalent. Let me give you a couple of things that Citizens have done specifically here, you know, in the last however long. So we can't just write a policy with Citizens if we want to, okay? There's a rule that they have in place, and this just changed not too long ago. They had a rule that if there were any other options, and they do some of their own quoting too to make sure we don't, you know, do this. If there were any other options within 10% of their premium, we can't write with Citizens. Recently, they changed that to 20%. So if we have another option at all that's within 20% of their premium, we cannot write with Citizens, and we won't write with Citizens. We're not gonna, it's not worth trying to get away with it. I mean, what would we?
We avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to, you know, you just don't, this is about your integrity and not, you don't want to lose your license and things like that. So we just don't do it. That's not great for the client because I got this $2,000 option for you with Citizens, but I can't write it. So you got to go with that 3,000 because it doesn't fall within whatever the percentages are, within 20%. So the 20% rule, that's one of the things they've implemented. Of course, over the next 3 years, they have scheduled rate increases coming over 3 years. Depopulation is a big deal right now. Some of y'all might have even gotten some of these. This has been going on with them for years and years and years. They were doing it 10 years ago. And then it kind of, I didn't see it for a while, and now they're doing it again. Basically, depopulation is when your clients get a letter in the mail and Citizens says, we've been shopping your rate for you, and we have another option for you with X company over here. So that's them saying, we're moving you. Now, what they do, and this is really, really important because I hate this part of what they do, and they're doing it the same way they've been doing it for 10 years. But here's what they do to your client, or they do it to you if you have Citizens. If you get one of those letters in the mail, that your client gets one of those and they call you and ask about it, the way I think it should be is they should, hey, I got an option for you. Do you want it? Okay, you don't want it? Okay, that's fine. We'll just keep you with Citizens. You would think that's how they would do it. No, they're basically saying, we're moving you to this other company that's $2,000 more than your premium. And unless you go on our website and tell us that you don't want this option, we're moving you to this option. Okay, so you have people that don't open their mail, or they, you know, it's junk mail, and they don't look at it. And then the next thing they know, their mortgage payment has spiked 6 or 8 months later. Why? Well, because they got moved to another home insurance company that was $1,000, $2,000 more. So they have to, if you get it, your client gets it, you have to go online and tell them you don't want it, or they're going to move you automatically. That's how the depopulation works. Okay. And this is a big one too. Remember 4-point inspections. When do you need a 4-point inspection now?
When you get insurance.
Well, on how old is the home got to be? Because newer homes, you don't need a 4-point inspection. But what's the guideline been? If you have a home that's this old, you need to get a 4-point inspection. What's been that number? Anybody know? Well, with all companies, it's been different, right? Most companies have been like 30 years, 40 years before they would require a 4-point inspection. Citizens basically upset the whole market. Last year, they changed their guidelines to 20 years. So when they changed it to 20, that means we asked for it at 20, right? So if you have a home that's 20 years or older, don't even second guess yourself, get a 4-point inspection. Because Citizens is going to require it at 20 years, okay? That's a big number, 20, remember that. Might be on a quiz later, okay? I shouldn't have given that away. Now it's just going to be the first person to raise their hand when I get to that question. Anyway, maybe I can come up with a different question. All right, and then what was the last thing? Oh, yeah, this is a big one too. This just happened recently. How much life left on a roof is the norm? Like before, hey, it's 16 years old, but it has this much life. What's been that number?
10.
Three.
Three's kind of been the standard, and 3 years of life left has been the standard for Citizens.
Wow.
They just changed it to 5. Okay, so if you've got a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old shingled roof or any roof, and your inspector puts on there, it's got 3 years of life left, used to be fine. Now Citizens, you have to have at least 5. It's 5 or more, right? Not more than 5. If I remember correctly. Yeah, 5 or more. So that changes a lot. And let me just say briefly about this. Who your inspection company is really, really important. It needs to be somebody you trust. It needs to be somebody that's not doing you favors as well. It needs to be somebody that's not fudging numbers to get your client insurance, because it's going to come back to bite your client, who's going to be mad at you after the fact. Because if they say the roof has, and it used to be, the inspection would come back and the roof was like, man, you got 2 years of life left on this. I can't get insurance unless it says 3. Okay, I'll change it to 3. Okay, those days are history. You cannot do that anymore. All right, and inspectors can't do that anymore. And if you've got inspectors that are still doing that, they're not good inspectors. Okay, so now it's 5 years. So, oh, you said 4. I needed it 5. No, you don't want to do that, because what's going to happen? Every one of these home insurance companies, Citizens included, they come out to the buyer's house after closing within 30 days, and they're doing their own, at least an exterior inspection, and a lot of them have gone to interior inspections. So the inspectors that Citizens uses to go out and look at that roof, are they trying to do your client any favors? No, they're going to be stricter than maybe some of the inspectors out there. If they have any question at all about the roof, they're going to call it out. So then what happens when they go, that roof don't have 5 years of life left. It's got 2 or 3. So what happens then?
Your client gets bit in the butt.
Your client, just like I said, your client's about to get bit in the butt, and they're going to get a notice in the mail, and that notice is going to have something with the word cancellation or roof replacement on it. That's not doing your client a favor. So my recommendation, and I know you have inspection companies, I have inspection companies that we like, and some of them are actually, I think, been in this building. Those are companies you can trust, and I would strongly encourage, if you have a new listing, do a pre-listing inspection, get all that stuff figured out at the very, very beginning. If you have a buyer, look for those things, get those inspections as quickly as possible, so you know up front. Those days also where we used to be able to, I've got 10 carriers that as long as you get the roof replaced within 30 days after closing, they're fine. You know, we can write, those days are over too. So you really have to stress hard getting the house fixed and perfect on the front side, on the seller side, because there's just not that many options left where you can do repairs afterwards. It's down to 2 or 3 maybe, and some of those companies don't even write in all the zip codes. So that's another. I'm just full of bad news. I got to give y'all a dad joke before I get into it. That's what I do in my office. I'd end with a bad. Every time I'd get up and stand in front of my office in Clearwater, I was always giving them bad news, and I was like, I just got to start coming up with dad jokes or something better. I got one just in case I need it. All right. All right. 2023. They're asking for a 14.2% rate increase. I don't know if that's gone through yet or not. Do you know on that?
Not sure.
Okay, these are some of the things I've already talked about. I didn't know that was the next slide. Depopulation, we already talked about that. 5 years remaining, useful life. Okay, this is a big one here. So there are other big requirement that's changed, and this is really, you need to know this. This is really important because this affects everything. In the past, what happens when you have a roof that's been replaced and the inspector says, oh, it looks like it was, replaced 5 years ago. 10 years ago. What if you can't find a permit? And that happens all the time, doesn't it? Right? And it's 3 sellers ago. Somebody's Uncle Bob, I can get you a deal on that roof. I know how to put roofs on, and they do it. Well, maybe they do it and it's a great job, but there's no permit. There's nothing proving that roof has been replaced. So what Citizens has done in the past is they've trusted the inspector to have a good estimate, and they put it on the 4-point inspection, right? You see it on there. We're estimating useful life of 8 years left. Roofs looks like it was replaced 5 years ago. It's probably got 10 years of life left, right? Citizens is not accepting that anymore. Okay, so the way this works, and just stay with me on the thinking of this, the one positive thing about Citizens on their requirements, their underwriting requirements, is they're more lenient about roofs than almost any company out there. They technically will give you 25 years on a shingled roof and 50 years on clay or on tile and metal roofs. There's hardly any companies that will do that anymore. Now you have to have that 5 years of life left, right? So stick with me on this. Let's say you have a 25, if 25 years is that's their deadline, that's the oldest that roof can be, right? That shingle roof, 25 years. Take out the whole, how much useful life it's got, 25 years. Let's say you have a house that's 25 years or older. At that point, you have to prove that that roof has been replaced. And there's 2 ways you can do it. A permit, or you have to have the paid invoice or contract when the roof is replaced.
The permit has to say final on it. It cannot
Yes.
say complete.
Yes.
It cannot say pending. It cannot say, what was the other one? Complete, pending, and there's another one,
I don't remember.
filed or something, filed.
Final's the big one though.
But it
That's what you wanna
has to
see.
say final on it.
Yeah,
Is that, cause I just did this for a listing that I have, and the guy replaced the roof in 2017, I contacted the vendor. They just never went through the process of closing it out, so now, of course, we have, in Hillsborough County, we have 2 different permits systems, the old and the new. They had to go into the new, they marked that one complete, they put one in into the old system, they put one in under the new, they went out there and did an inspection and everything. But I'm pretty sure, I just looked at it yesterday, it just said complete, it didn't say
Now,
final.
Hillsborough County though is different than some other counties because in Hillsborough County, there's a different way that it's listed to where complete might be acceptable. We just have to look at it first to see if that's acceptable. But Hillsborough County is the only one that I know of, I don't know if you know more, that will allow it to say complete as long as there's certain specifications there. But if you have any questions, you can send that to me and I can double check on that.
yeah,
Yeah,
It's-
because there's another one that they have called closed, and they close permits out just because they're older than 5
Yep,
years.
I've
And I'm
had,
like, that's useless to
Yep.
me.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, cause it doesn't.
Yeah.
if
verify
that's
anything.
if it does say closed on it like that, we can still write it through Citizens, but we have to submit it unbound and it takes up to 10 business days for them to approve it. So
Yeah,
it can
that's-
delay a closing,
that's the issue.
it really depends, cause I've had a good majority that have been approved and then just a few here and there that I've had to call and say,
Citizens won't be an option.
no.
So, and what she just said is the key thing, right? This doesn't mean they can't get insurance with Citizens if you can't find the permit. And the good thing is a lot of the inspection companies now are just attaching the permit to the 4-point inspection or the wind mitigation. So they put it at the end. They're doing that as a result of Citizens changes and us telling all the inspection companies, we need to know if there's a permit pulled. So if there's no permit, can't find it, it doesn't exist, for whatever reason, Uncle Bob, or just can't find it, whatever. And you can't prove the roof's been replaced, you have no documentation. It might have been replaced 3 years ago, but you can't prove it because it was another seller and you have no way to contact them. There's no documentation. It does not mean you can't write with Citizens. Here's what it does mean. It's exactly what she's talking about. It's going to delay how quickly you can write it with Citizens. Because in the past, we could just submit all the documentation. Here's the 4-point inspection, the wind mitigation inspection. 4-point inspection says it's got 8 years of life left. Here you go. In the past, we could submit all that and hit bind, click the bind button, and we have evidence of insurance to give to everybody, to the lender and everybody. But now we don't have that, right? They're not going to allow us to hit the bind button. We have to submit it to them and then wait. Some of y'all have run into this with remediated sinkhole homes before, where Citizens can take weeks to approve them. Now they're doing that with these roofs. If we can't prove to them that it's been replaced, then you're handing it over to them. And they initially said 5 business days. And I was told the same thing by Lindsay the other day. They're looking, now they're closer to
Yeah.
10
So when
days.
should, so when should we tell our clients to call an insurance company? I'm thinking
At the very beginning,
at the
all
very
this has to
beginning,
be
the minute
done.
they get under contract.
Right, because how
Very
this can
beginning.
mess you up is it's gonna, if you've
Yeah.
got a short closing window. Okay, I've got this citizen policy ready to go, but it could take 10 days for them to say yes, and you're closing in 12. Your lenders, that's not enough time for your lender, it just causes a lot of problems, so that's why I was saying even a pre-listing inspection, get everything done as quickly as you can up front. For that time frame. Just know that citizens is only an option if you have 10, up to 10 days for them to say, okay, we'll accept it. And she's right, most of the time they are accepting it. But it can slow down your closing window, okay? All right. Yeah, we've already talked about that. We've already talked about that. So what does the future hold? Again, I've touched on that briefly and we're about to wrap up. I've touched on that briefly. The legislation can change. Maybe they'll get more lenient. We saw some of that. We think we'll see some of that with what happened with the legislation that made all those strict requirements about condos because of what happened down in Miami with the condo collapsing. They basically said, all those things have to, if it's 3 stories and 30, they have all these guidelines where they're trying to get all those inspected. There's not enough inspectors or not enough engineers in the state of Florida to do all that. So we're wondering, okay, that they reacted, which was not a bad reaction, but a lot of times these reactions by the government are because of the tragedy that happened, and they should. And then later down the road, we're like, okay, we just can't fulfill this promise. There's no physical way to do this. So there's part of me, and I've heard some other people say, this is one of those things that the legislature could change down the road. So maybe some of this could get changed, but I would not anticipate, just my opinion. I wouldn't start telling your clients next year, things are going to be better in home insurance. I think 2 years is probably more accurate. Yeah.
So do you think, because one of the things because back in the day, I worked in the car industry for a while, very short while. And back then, you're in a car accident and you have tires that are damaged, okay? And the tires have 40,000 miles on them and they have a $50,000 life expectancy. When the insurance company pays you to replace those tires, they only give you 20% of the value of a tire because you're not buying a brand new tire. You weren't replacing a brand new tire, you're replacing a, 80% used tire.
Mhm.
With roofs, the same way. I mean, if you
Right.
go ahead and file a claim and you got a roof that's 18 years old, do you see that changing where they start changing it and say, look, if I get an insurance claim on it, I'm not gonna give you full value on an 18-year-old roof. I'm gonna give you.
This is already happening with some companies, and I think personally, I think it's a good compromise for companies to not leave the state. If they, basically what happens is, and I don't know how many of our companies do this, a lot of
A
them.
lot are jumping on with the ACV. for
Yeah, they're
roofs.
covering it either at actual cash value instead of replacement cost, or some of them have a value schedule. So every year the roof ages, they're covering a smaller percent of it. It's a 5-year-old roof. Okay, the insurance company is going to cover 85% of the value of a brand new roof, right? And then that way they don't get bit in the butt at 16 years. Something happens, you had a 16-year-old roof, this is a way for them to kind of come back into the market. I think it's a great idea. I know for clients, if you had a storm or something, you're going to want your whole roof covered. But this is a way, I think, for us not to just lose them all,
Mhm.
right? Don't put them on the hook for the full value if you've got an old roof. So, yes, I think that's a good point. Okay. All right, you ready for the quiz? And then we're going to wrap up.
I want to go back to Uncle Bob for a minute.
Uncle Bob, we've all got one, don't we? I can-
You're
Oh, you need me to come fish for the
Yeah, you're- talking about Uncle Bob putting that roof on,
Right.
even though it's Uncle Bob, he still needs a permit.
You would think. And if he's pulled the permits and he did a great job, it's fine.
Well, actually, technically, if it wasn't Uncle Bob, and if it was the homeowners themselves, can they do it without a permit? I've understood that homeowners can always do improvements on their own home without a permit.
Well, here's
So
where,
technically
if you
they
have a
might
roof
be-
that's not permitted, just to clear,
Yeah.
if you have a roof that's not permitted, but it's in great shape, home insurance companies are gonna be fine with it.
Right.
But where it's gonna impact the insurance rate because you're not getting that credit on your wind mitigation inspection. That's a credit. Whether a roof permit was pulled is a credit on the wind mitigation inspection. And it can be a little bit of money to a lot of money. So,
So encourage people to get those.
yeah, because it's gonna cost, when they sell the house, it's gonna cost the buyer.
I'm a certified permit tech for the city of Sarasota, and, you have to have, even if you own a home, you have to pull a permit for a roof permit, because they
Yeah.
want to make sure you have to get 3 inspections. The first one is when you take off the roof, the second one, when you're starting putting down, is in process, and then the final one will say final, and that's how you know that it's closed out, because it should have 3 inspections on there. If it doesn't have 3 inspections, they didn't get it closed out
Yeah.
properly.
Exactly. So permits are required, but you just have people that try to get around the system, right? All right, ready for question number 1. Now, here's how we're gonna do this, because I know people are just gonna holler out an answer, or somebody's gonna raise their hand and go, All right, so we can't do all that. So, if you know the answer and you want the $10 Starbucks card, it needs to be a first person answer. Raise your hand and you have to know the answer immediately. Giving you a second to give me the answer. Don't think about it for 5 minutes or 5 seconds. Ready? Okay. Question number 1. Should I even try to read it? Don't raise your hand until I've read the question. And you want to help me, you be the judge.
Oh, don't put.
Get them all mad at you,
I
right?
think you should just,
I should judge, but so you're mad at me. My hand was up first. I feel like a teacher in a classroom with kids, you know? Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, ready. Question number 1. I don't want to be in your way. Oh, you can see that. Never mind. Okay. I'm in my way. What's at least one major change from the legislation that was passed in 2022?
The assignment of benefits
Yes, is what?
is no longer allowed.
Yes, thank you very much. Good job. And yours was the only hand that went. That was.
We were waiting until you totally read that.
Some of y'all are waiting for that other question I already gave away earlier. Okay, I think I'm not gonna read this one. I think it's this one. Yes. 20 years. Yeah, you can't win it twice, so you were first, but yeah, 20 years on a 4-point inspection, and just because they're doing it, just have that in your head, right? 20 years for 4-point inspections, a couple other numbers, 15 years for shingled roofs, 15 years for hot water heaters. Those are just numbers you need to
Water
kinda-
heaters are becoming a very big thing now.
Yeah,
Before, I mean, they always have been, but the carriers are really, really cracking down. They cannot be older than 15 years old.
yeah, once it hits 15, you've lost the
Half of
vast
your-
majority, yeah.
yeah.
Is there an impact, if you don't mind my, again, is there an impact whether they're gas, electric, or the on-demand?
I haven't seen them make a distinction on the age unless there are a couple companies that make a distinction if it's in the garage. But it used to be several. I think there's still a couple of companies, if it's in the garage, they might give up to 20. If
Yeah.
it's in the house, it's 15. That's the only distinction I know of at all for them. All right, last question. How much remaining useful life does citizens require for roofs? I think your hand was the first. Okay. I'm sorry. Hers was kind of like right here. Yours, she had less room to travel. Okay, and I think that's it. Any questions? Hey, are you the one who came with a list? Here's my list.
No,
And we'll stay afterwards too and answer anything we can.
It's all based on the same thing.
Okay.
So recently, in commercials,
Mhm.
for this company, or I don't know how many. A spraying the thing that they can extend the roof life of your roof by just spraying.
Right.
good point.
I don't.
I have not seen, that doesn't do anything as far as insurance does. It might make the useful life longer as far as, but if it's in bad shape, just spraying something over the top is not changing how old it is. And so the insurance companies are still looking at if they have a guideline for how old that flat roof is, which again, that can be 8 or 10 years. A lot of companies, those don't have nearly as much life as other roofs, so.
Because to me, they're implying that it's extending the roof and it's gonna extend the.
It's probably for
insurance.
those people that are buying into that don't have homeowners. They don't. There's a
Yeah.
guy in Sun City Center that put that on his roof, and I know that I've talked to 2 people who've been in his house, and they're like, oh my God. So he's not insuring that, he doesn't have enough money to insure it, just like he doesn't have enough money to.
There's a lot of that stuff being said out there that's like, yeah, check with the insurance company, make sure there's things being said about solar panels that are not, there's, you can have a hard time getting insurance on
Yeah.
solar panels if you're doing certain things or whatever, so. Yes, any other questions? And again, we'll be staying afterwards too, so.
I have questions, but they're not.
Yeah, we'll be more than willing to answer them. Okay, yes.
Oh, do you, with citizens, like when Diane's question about like the proration or the actual cash value, when, is citizens doing that too? Do you know if?
I don't think so. They're not, you mean
Based
like,
on the roof, yeah, based on the roof
like
age.
that the percentage of it
Oh,
goes
that's
down?
roof
No,
schedule?
No.
no, they don't do a roof schedule.
Do you know like how many companies are actually doing, because we heard that more companies, I like same thing, that more companies gonna be doing
I
that,
would-
but.
You might know more than me.
Probably 10 or more,
Yeah, I was gonna say a little below that, so somewhere in that range.
yeah.
But it could be more and more. I think it's smart on their part. It's not necessarily great for those homeowners who have a loss. But at least they know it, you know, hey, the older your roof's getting, they're not gonna cover it as much, you know, so at
And
least
they
they know.
they make the client sign the form showing like a part of the application. This
Isn't-
is
yeah.
what the roof schedule is, you have to sign it.
Yeah, so that you know what's going on. Hopefully one day down the road, we won't need any of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
No, so what makes the difference with, I'm using Texas and California,
Mhm.
why, what's different with their insurance? I would think that they would, both those states, because they've had devastation there, or, you know, storms just as bad or worse than us.
Yeah.
What's the difference in those states versus our state?
Well, home insurance policies here have a hurricane deductible, so there's hurricane coverage tagged onto it. That's not common in other states. But it's more about the fraud. I mean, all the litigation, 80% right here.
Well,
So
that's
those are
what I'm
what's
saying.
driving up the rates.
What's the, you know, because there, you know, there's hurricanes going in Louisiana and Texas, but then they've had more in the last 10 years than we
Yeah.
have.
Well, a lot of those things we had up there, what the legislation has changed, a lot of those were specific to our state for many, many years. And so, you know, if there's not an incentive, I think some of those other states are just don't have that incentive. I think it is kind of ironic that we're asking the legislatures to make these changes when a lot of the legislatures are lawyers. And so we're asking the lawyers to make decisions and change things that are anti-lawyer. So it's kind of funny, but. All right, quickly, before you go, again, let me just remind you, if you need a quick quote, you can we'll have this here if you wanted, it'll take you 2 minutes just to put a couple things in. We do have on the back, there's some pens and also, I have more pens than that. I didn't bring many in. There's a piece of paper, just take that. And that little pad, that's a good way if you just want to have a quick request and hand it to Kim, that's a great way to do it. And then there's a bunch of cups back there if you want them, take those with you too. So those are kind of nice tumblers. Except they're orange, but that's part of our logo too. So, oh, and let me put, you might want to take a screenshot of this as well.
Great picture.
Take a screenshot of that there. So this is Kim's direct line if you need to contact her. This is her email address if you need to make a request to her as well. And again, if she's not here, she's still working. She
Yeah.
just is not here by the bathrooms. So.
But what is that, I can't seem to find that app. I went on the website, I couldn't seem to find where to download it there.
You have an iPhone or a,
What?
do you have an iPhone or an Android?
iPhone.
What, we have an Android, we just went to the Play Store and put in, insurance, right?
Yeah,
It's on there. I'll-
it is on the,
But is that gonna go to Kim? or-
that store.
No, it
in
goes-
Florida.
So you find her in there.
Yeah, and then you click on me
Yeah,
and
the
you're
insurance
able
agent
to
is the
allow.
platform that we're using.
Yeah.
Go to. I have my own app. Yeah, download that and you should. So you went to insurance agent.
When I added to here, the QR code came up and.
Because mine's there, I have to-
Right for you. Yeah.
That's it. On insurance agent, you scan the code, right?
On this, yeah, it
Yes.
comes.
Great. So that, you didn't hear that? Download insurance agent app. Scan the QR code on your business card there. And that'll take you to her quoting site.
Right, so now.
Get a quote. from Kim. And that's it right there. Name, phone number, email. address. Well, insurance agent isn't it? And then we- and it directs
It's a
you
web,
how-
it's a web app, it's not a iPhone app. I'm going to the internet. I saw the name or something.
Yeah, so that's, and then you go out to the information. Like, per question.
Yeah,
Here's the broker, not a broker. Real estate. Yeah, I like it. High value homes, great.
Is she?
Yeah.
Okay.
More involved, we send those out. I can understand. Sure.
Jason.
Good day, thank you.
You know,
Yes.
it's
I don't think so yet.
I closed.
I haven't seen, I just, no, I'm almost positive they're not. I just wrote a frontline policy a couple days ago.
Yeah.
First policy I've written in like a month and a half. Yes, but frontline I don't believe is.
Yeah.
But tell her to keep a lookout on that, because a lot of people are starting to do it, like this year.
So she wouldn't know though, because I think they just renewed, so it's not something she would know until.
Hey, we're gonna get on the schedule to teach once a month, so you're welcome to come. We'll try to make it as relevant. There's a lot of things that we can talk about, so.
What else? I'm telling her.
We'll have a flood class, we'll have a hurricane class,
On,
inspection class.
on the app, when she hits team to try to find, oh, yeah, shows that me on her phone, but she's already got a policy with us, so it shows like Nina, Lindsay,
Yeah, like
Jeanette,
when she
John,
hits team.
but I'm not on there.
When she just registered all her stuff and like signed up for the app, I guess it automatically realizes.
Well, so you're a current client of ours, right? It's gonna put whoever, like, that means that someone on Lindsay's team, not her, someone on Lindsay's team wrote your policy.
That was our personal policy. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
But
Oh, I see what you're saying now. So now it's not letting you.
They do a new
I got
post to like send it to me.
I think the account I use.
But when she goes for, request a quote, it should allow her to pick me.
I would think so.
I don't think, yeah.
Oh, you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's so much. I can show you where she's at.
Yes.
Okay, so.
I'm the policy inspector.
Yeah,
The
okay.
vast majority of counties, I
Yeah.
have seen a couple of things, but agents.
Yeah. So, one women, and I hire, two hires, yeah, deduct the entire fees and that,
Agents.
that's fine. The other three are all of the general age brackets. They all have, one of them only has now instead of three and three. Yeah. They all have,
How did you get on? I just.
But I'll show you what ideas. I can better.
Right, so one is not only, he's not only 500, he has to pay him 500, so he got $1,000.
Two others, one is, one is 10 years older than they're going.
No, that's
And how long age bracket is.